Meanwhile, the world's richest and most powerful continue to discuss the fate of Ukraine at the Davos Economic Forum, with the dominating sentiment that Ukrainians must fight to the end.
I am totally committed as one person to seeing Ukraine to the end with a win, not basically resolving in some type of a treaty. I don't think that is where we are and where we should be.
We are very happy to have them fight our fight.
Ukraine must win this war.
However, the only Western voice coming in sharp contrast was the speech of a prominent US foreign policy veteran, Henry Kissinger. He said that Ukraine should become a neutral country and this should be a goal for the West. And that's exactly what Russia has been demanding all along.
The ideal outcome would be if Ukraine could be constituted as a neutral kind of state, as a bridge between Russia and Europe.
Indeed, a neutral bridge would serve to bring Russia and Europe into closer cooperation through an alliance that would also help the European Union and Russia better compete against both Beijing and Washington, which could also help explain why the United States is constantly interfering in a country on the other side of the planet to ensure that this bridge never gets built. In calling for urgent peace in Ukraine, Kissinger could very well be drawing on his own professional experience and regrets. You see, the terms of the Vietnam War ceasefire, which Kissinger negotiated on President Nixon's behalf, could very well have been reached 4 years earlier, with tens of thousands more lives saved, since the deal had ultimately changed very little within that time frame. So how does Kissinger suggest resolving the territorial disputes between Russia and Ukraine?
Ideally, the dividing line should return to the status quo ante.
The status quo ante in this case means that control over Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk would be restored to Russia. It's almost certainly not what the West and Ukraine want to hear. But Kissinger, as he always does, is speaking from the perspective of a foreign policy realist, seeking tangible results in favor of peace, and not as the kind of ideologue that tends to dominate the Western foreign policy establishment these days.
I've always been troubled by things like the Davos Forum or the Bilderberg Forum or the Shangri-La Forum. It's always the world's richest and most powerful people hobnobbing with the world's most important politicians. To tell you the truth, I think it's a dangerous phenomenon because seeds are planted by the CEOs of the biggest corporations, of defense contractors, in the minds of policymakers, Americans, British, NATO, European Union, Australia. And I just think that it's a bad mix. I think that these worlds should remain separate and independent of one another. Yeah, this is a very popular position to take in the United States, that the war should go on until the last Ukrainian. Well, the reason that that's a popular position is actually very simple. Almost all of the money that Congress is appropriating for the war in Ukraine goes directly to US defense manufacturers. It doesn't go to the Ukrainian people. It doesn't go to the Ukrainian government. It goes to the biggest defense companies. Eventually, the US government's policy is going to have to be to support the Minsk Accords, because that's the only way that we can bring this conflict to an end and to try to minimize the loss of life.